I'd like to introduce Damien Katz, who is a relatively new staff member. I don't know if you're going to talk a little bit about your background at all, but he's sort of a twofer because he's a librarian and he's also a software developer. So we got two for the price of one in that regard. But his actual title is Library Technology Development Specialist, but otherwise known as Mr. VuFind because he's been specifically tasked with looking at and working on that project. But as has already been talked about, and we'll continue to talk about, the fact that we do a lot of cross-fertilization. You know, anytime we turn to someone in the technology group or from the different teams, when Michael asked all of us to stand up from the digital library team, we're all on these different teams and we all work together, and I think that that has actually made us stronger as an organization because that cross-pollination, cross-fertilization also builds strong levels of communication among all of the different groups, including the in-house technologists, which is great because then we don't have to go beg, borrow, and steal from academic computing on campus. So, turn it over to Damien Katz.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, as VuFind is a big part of my job, and that means that I have to be sort of the friendly public face of the software. I find myself talking about it an awful lot and saying the same things over and over. So before I start, I thought I would sort of pull the room and figure out who I'm talking to and what you're interested in hearing. So first of all, how many of you are VuFind users? Do we have any VuFind users in the room? Okay, a couple. How many of you had never heard of VuFind before this morning's lecture? Oh, good. Not too many. Also, I'm interested to know how many of you consider yourself technology people, and how many of you are librarians? Anyone else both? No? All right, so we've got a good mix here. So you've already gotten a bit of an introduction to VuFind, and the first few years of its existence, VuFind has really been sort of a replacement for the online public catalog. Marketing material has from the beginning sort of said this is the way that you can present all of your library resources through a single interface and simplify the world for everyone. But really it's been focused on that one little piece. And one of the things that's really been changing a lot over the past year and with the VuFind development community is that we've been sort of following that vision of making VuFind capable of bringing all kinds of library resources together into a single place. And since that's been the big thing on my mind lately with regard to VuFind, I figured that's what I'll talk to you about today. But I'm always happy to answer any kind of questions about VuFind. We love to bring new people into the community and using the software. So if I don't touch on points that you're concerned with, find me afterwards or ask questions, and I'm always happy to talk VuFind. But this whole concept of bringing other things into VuFind beyond the catalog started when we subscribed to Summon. And I know at least a couple of you were at Summon Day, so you've seen my presentation on this before. I won't repeat the whole thing. But anyway, in case you aren't familiar with Summon, it's basically an enormous full-text index of all kinds of different journals, millions and millions of articles. So it allows users to find things across multiple databases. It's sort of a starting point for article searching. So having subscribed to this, we then have the challenge of how do we fit this into VuFind, into the experience that users are familiar with when they come to our website. And essentially, it came down to two choices for us. One feature that Summon offers is that you can just give them all your catalog records, and then Summon can become the whole deal for your users. Everything they search for, they go through Summon. They get a mixed list of local books and remote articles and so on and so forth. And certainly that's a tempting alternative because it means we don't have to do anything anymore. We just give all our stuff away and there's one search box and it's simple. The problem though, well, there are several problems. First of all, we would completely lose local control, and one of the things that VuFind has brought to us and that we benefit from is the fact that we have total control over how our catalog results are served. If something isn't coming up the way we like it, we can go in and make changes, and almost instantaneously we get what we want. If we decide that we want to search by a new field, we can just throw that in and it happens. So if we take all of this stuff off site, suddenly it's out of our hands again, and we're back into the queue asking the vendor for help if we need something to change. The other problem is a more conceptual one, which is that although the Google philosophy states that you want one box and you do your search and everything is in that one place, sometimes that isn't necessarily what makes sense. We're sort of serving two different types of needs. There's the catalog lookup need. I know that I'm looking for this book and I want to find it. There's the broader research need of I'm interested in this topic or this specific person and I want to find everything I can on it. Sometimes those two needs don't mesh well in a single search box. If you're looking for a particular book and when you search for it you get 20 pages of newspaper articles that happen to have the same words that are in the title of the book and you can't find the book, you get frustrated. So ultimately, the approach that we decided to take was to keep these things separately, to use VuFind for our local catalog searching and to incorporate Summon to bring in this broad pool of full text resources that otherwise people might not even know that they had access to. But there's certainly the appeal of being able to do one search and get all of that data in one place. So we took the perhaps lazy but I think pragmatic approach of a two-column search results screen, so that if we do the search I'm stealing from our instructional video for Dust Bowl, we now come back with two columns of results. On the left side we have Books and More, which is the local VuFind catalog. On the right we have Articles and More, which is all of the Summon materials. And then we have these little More Options links and tabs and lots of different access mechanisms by which users can explore more deeply in either of these areas to get to the traditional faceted search and so on that makes discovery tools distinctive. Now, I've lost track of my train of thought. The point of all of this is that there are two factors involved in the work I've been doing. There's first of all the technological issues, but there's also sort of the organizational, more traditional librarian issues to think about of, okay, we can do this, but what actually makes sense and where do we need to draw boundaries? What services do we want to provide? And I think that the environment here at Villanova has certainly offered good opportunities for collaboration and feedback. And again, also the open source environment where other people can contribute code back to a project. You can draw on ideas from a wide pool of users and bounce things off one another. All of these are important pieces of the library landscape that it pays to pay attention to, whether you're a technologist or a librarian technologist. But anyway, Summon was really just sort of the project that got me thinking about some of these things. And when Dave gives his next presentation about our digital library, he'll go more deeply into some of the other things. But in addition to the idea of being able to bring external services like Summon into VuFind and present them side by side, there has also been a lot of work recently on bringing other types of data into VuFind itself. Up to this point, most people using VuFind are loading MARC records from their catalog, and VuFind has gotten really good at indexing MARC records and searching through them. But there are lots of other data formats out there. There are people using DSpace and Content DM. There are people using open journal systems. There are people with archival materials in EAD format. All of these communities are interested in having a better search tool. Many of these people are interested in combining catalog searching with these other materials in one place. Again, the long-term complex issue here is not so much the matter of bringing the data into one place, but figuring out where lines need to be drawn, how you present it, how you make it understandable to the user. all still sort of in the early phases and something that I'm interested in collaborating with others on. So if any of you are thinking of using VuFind or want to bring more materials in, talk to me about this. But for now, just for the purposes of this demonstration, I've been doing some work to bring other data from on-campus sources into our VuFind system to prove that it's possible, and as a starting point for deciding how it should be organized and how it ultimately needs to be presented. So if we do a blank search of the catalog, and this is one of the great things about VuFind, you can just search for everything that you have and get it all back. And then go into the Books and More tab. You'll see that our collection facets show several different things. Here's our main catalog. We also have Finding Augustine, which is the Augustinian bibliography project that you heard about this morning. I loaded all of those records in here. We have our digital library, which you'll see more of shortly, our community bibliography, and then Concept and Expositions, which are two of the journals in our open journal system, which I believe you'll hear more about later in the day. And the good news is that it was really easy to get all of this data in here. I've recently added OAI PMH harvesting to VuFind. That's a fairly commonly used protocol for moving metadata from one place to another. And using XML style sheets, it's not hard to map just about anything to VuFind's internal index. So all these things just got plugged in, and you can search through them in a single screen. And then it all comes down to customizing how they look. So for example, let's take a look at some concept articles. Pretty straightforward. We've got our title, author, publication date, and usefully the full text link, which takes you right to the full text of the article. And of course the next step here, which I haven't tackled yet but will be coming soon, is getting the full text of the article into VuFind so that as people search, they're not just searching the metadata but the full content. Though a word of warning there that also comes out of the Summon experience, throwing lots of full text into an index and expecting magical results is not the answer. Because you can search for a word and you can find it in 30,000 documents, but if all you're searching is the full text, you don't know what's on the top of that 30,000 article list. It's probably not what you want. And so again, this is where library work piles on technology, because if you've made an informed abstract and assigned useful subject headings and so forth, then an indexing tool like VuFind can make informed relevancy ranking decisions. So you can find those obscure things that are only in the full text, but you can also find major themes and highlighted points and get the broader stuff, the more useful starting points at the top of your list. One box only works if you get what you want in the first couple of screens, and you can only achieve that if your data is structured in a way that you can identify what is useful. So again, an area where sometimes the technology people like to just say, my magical tool solves everything. Sometimes it does, but often there's a lot of collaboration involved and thinking about what to implement before you implement it. So that's my basic lecture on collaboration. Also, I think the title of the talk has View Futures in it, so I should mention, as Joe hinted at, that we had the VuFind conference a couple of weeks ago, and if you go to the vufind.org website, look in our documentation page, we actually have a link to videos from that conference so you can see all of our exciting conversations. Also a PDF document with some of the outcomes of that. Certainly a big trend discussed there was all of this handling other types of data, bringing more things into VuFind, and I expect that a lot of our partners will continue to extend this. CRRA, the Catholic portal that uses VuFind, is doing some great work on getting EAD records into VuFind, and I think that will be useful to a lot of people. The National Library of Ireland is using VuFind as an image archive, so they've done some custom work so that you can actually search and see little thumbnails that pop up into larger images within the context of your search results. Also, outside of purely technical issues, there have been a lot of discussions recently about the formal structure of the VuFind community and getting more formalized testing procedures in place and so on. Up to this point, VuFind, although it has many participants and collaborators, has been sort of centralized as a one-person show as far as getting all of the things into the central repository and promoting it, and we're trying to broaden that scope and bring more people on board. So once again, the invitation is always open to try it out. I'm happy to work with people, and I think that this is a project that's going to be growing significantly over the coming years. If you have any really VuFind specific questions, I'll be happy to answer them now, but otherwise it might be best to hold to the end, and then Dave and I can answer things jointly after he's shown you our digital library.
Okay, hi, I'm Dave Lacey. It was mentioned earlier that I was brought on essentially to work on the digital library. Then we had some staffing issues shortly after I started, so I didn't really get to dive into this project till about a year ago. So this is it. We're getting ready to release it at next year's ACRL, and we came up with a name, Vutal, keeping with the theme. And essentially, if you're familiar with the digital library software available for libraries today, we mentioned a couple of the packages earlier. Content DM, which was the vendor-supplied program from OCLC. There is DSpace. There is Greenstone, which are two open source options. Fedora repository system. And what we came up with was kind of a combination between Content DM and DSpace, both a document level management system and a kind of item per page book level scanning operation, and then married both together. Its architecture is based on open source technologies. METS is a metadata format maintained by the Library of Congress, which is the schema for describing a digital object. And it's very flexible. It encapsulates descriptive metadata, administrative metadata, file structure metadata. We use Exist, which is a native XML database for storing our METS documents, and Orbeon, which is a Java-based XForms processing engine. All of which are open source and standards based. So before we dive into the system itself, our basic workflow for cataloging and creating these objects is pretty straightforward. We scan the item. Well, I guess even before that, we have to decide what items are going to be incorporated. And then we scan them. There's a batch file process. We enter metadata. We set up the physical structure of the object, page order, things like that. Then we publish it and make it available online. Again, we scan our resources, crop the images if necessary, and then there is a overnight process that transforms these TIFFs into serviceable records to be used online. And it's pretty flexible. We can add other formats if we wanted to. But essentially, the overnight process will give us 3 different size JPEGs, and it'll run an OCR on the page. And then you go to the actual administration of the system and build a collection. I screenshotted all of this out of fear of running a live demonstration and having something go horribly wrong. So this is the main view of within the administration. It's showing on the top the collections, I guess the folders that contain sub-collections and items. And then below that are the items within that particular resource. So if you look in the top left, we're in our Americana collection, where we have the Melville Margolini, which you heard about earlier, and then several resources under that. So you can create a new collection name, Lacey Collection, there it is at the top. And then you can go in there and create, instantiate a new resource. So now we have our record, and there's different options here for editing. The first icon is for editing the metadata. The second is for attaching images. The third is for viewing the raw XML of the METS document. And then you can move this resource within the repository if you wish, or delete it. So here's the metadata editing view. This is what METS considers the header information, the agents, the status. The basic agent information that we're providing is the disseminator, which would be us, and the creator of the document, which would be the person who's cataloging the record. The item status is what controls whether or not it's viewable online or suppressed. The metadata, we're using Dublin Core for the descriptive metadata, and you can add and delete individual options as you will. All the options are listed on the right. Then there's the administrative process information, the rights, digital provenance, the tasks like physically scanning the object. All of these things need to be cataloged and carried along for preservation, for digital preservation reasons. Then the meat of the application is actually storing and organizing the file data. And the file data I mean by the images of the book or the documents. So, like I mentioned earlier, we now have several different file formats and versions of each image that have to be attached and ordered and labeled. And then you can attach other document level items as well. So we'll go into our resource again, and this time we'll click the attach images, and we'll take you to the screen. You navigate through a tree to the directory of images that you want to attach to your record, and you'll see this particular one has 2 TIFFs, 2 pages to this one. I think it's a letter, front and back. And then you just click attach, and you're transferred back to the digital library under the file data section, showing 2 rows in our table, essentially 2 pages. And then the columns depict which images are associated with this particular page of the item, or this particular order of the item. It doesn't really matter if it's a page or not. I'll explain more about that in a minute. So you can see we have everything except a transcription. And we can add more file format options. We have plans to extend to video and audio, and it'll just be a matter of adding another category to be able to describe. Gave it a couple layers, page 1, page 2. And you'll notice on the top left there's 2 buttons. One's called page level, one's called document level. This was our solution to attaching document level transcriptions to the whole book. You could, I guess, attach a transcription to each page if it were page level transcription, but a lot of the times we have one PDF that encompasses all these pages in one. So the flexible METS format allows for subsections under the physical structure. So we created 2 buckets, really. One for the individual pages and one for the document level items. So if we go into the document level section, we'll add a couple pages, and we'll then attach 2 different copies of the same transcription. The first being the PDF, and the second being the Word document, which could potentially lead to collaborative editing and things like that. So each of the little green plus signs converts into an upload mechanism. So you would select the file from your computer and attach it. And I attached 2 thumbnails as well that will accompany this transcription on the front end. And I just found 2 generic PDF and doc thumbnails to go along with it. And then we have the front end, which I feel comfortable going to a live demonstration. So if we do a blank search on the library catalog, as Damien showed earlier, we show all of our additional collections that are now being archived obviously one of which is the digital library. So if we facet by that, we will now just see only the items that have been indexed from our exist database. And you'll see, in no particular order, just several versions of the truth teller, letters. But if we search further to a particular collection that I know contains certain document level transcriptions, our Stokes collection, we can go into the record, and it'll take you to the front end of our digital library. So you'll notice, obviously, we have the 4 pages of a letter on the left, and all of these are zoomable, which Michael showed you earlier. But now we also have an additional tab called Docs, which are the root level documents associated with this item, which you can download or view, open, and then the metadata is still there as well. And there was a question earlier about the relationship management of items within the digital library, and I kind of touched on it a little bit. But the obvious answer that I didn't mention was that the relationships of all of these items within the index are handled through the faceting. We're still missing the one key kind of hierarchical faceting that everything gets built as through our cataloging process. But there is the classifications of just cataloging standards, like you can facet by author, format, language, and any other metadata that we choose to attach to this object can then be cataloged in the index, and everything could be browsable through the same subject headings that we use for the regular catalog. So that's about it. I guess we can field some questions. Pardon? Oh, yes, yeah. One last point. This is a new project. We're getting ready to launch it, open source, and there's a lot of things on my list that, aside from little bugs and tweaks, we have high hopes to extend the software to be usable in different capacities. The metadata editing tool does not necessarily need to be hooked up to our repository. You could theoretically attach it to a Fedora repository and things like that. So we'd like to kind of separate the projects a little bit, but in getting to the original topics by Joe, building the community around something like this is very important. So we're in the early stages, and I invite any resources, human resources, that wish to be involved to contact me. And if you want to discuss it later, I'll be around as well. But I guess we can open up for questions.
Yeah.
So when you say distance between the two systems, do you mean right now Voodoo will only work for folks who are using Viewfind?
No. Voodoo will work. Wow, and I've been not calling it Voodoo. I've been sticking to VuDL, but I just slipped for the first time. So no, it runs as its own repository management. And then the front end will be Viewfind or whatever you want it to be. You'll have a database of digital objects that you can display in any manner that you want if you have the resources to write a custom front end. But it makes sense to just kind of package it, not make Viewfind a requirement, but not write a front end for something that we have a functioning front end for.
Can I just pop up on that in terms of one of the things that we talked about at the Viewfind Summit meeting was the notion of a wholly modular architecture with extendability. So in a way, these are pluggable modules that build out functions, and that Viewfind would naturally fit on top of it, but it wouldn't necessarily fit on top of it. There could be other ways you could suck out and index the same data. So building it in components that logically fit together and can be distributed together or be separated is kind of the principle behind not only this, but a lot of other things we're talking about in terms of the next set of enhancements for the discovery environment.
How much of Dublin Core are you supporting? Are you going into the relationships?
No.
Versioning, that kind of thing?
No, not at all.
All right. Any considerations do that?
Yes, that's another aspect I'd like to enhance is to not force somebody to use Dublin Core for the descriptive metadata. Extend it to support mods as well, which shouldn't be that hard. There are people using the same architecture to write mods editors, so it could potentially just be something you can drop in. But right now, I'm just working off our existing implementation.
The relationship fields in Dublin Core specifically could help you relate to other collections outside of your own collection, as well as other versioning sort of.
Right. The trick with managing the relationships lies not so much in defining what they are with each individual document, but how to incorporate it into a faceted environment. Which is, there is a patch, I guess, for Solar that handles hierarchical faceting, but it's not part of the main trunk and should not be encouraged, I guess, at this time until they incorporate it.
I hope this isn't a terrible question because I know everything's supposed to be open. But if I have a collection of art history slides, and that I'm looking for the correct way to disseminate them. Do you guys have any sort of authentication? Like if you had something that was just like, oh, you had to keep local to your university, but you just wanted to kind of put it in the mix of all your open collections, is there a way to authenticate users?
Authenticate, right now our authentication is based under the rights management. So another option would be to add, let me find the slide. Apply another option under rights, and when you index it within VuFind, you can specify, based on the particular viewing rights, what populates the 856 field, and you can proxy the link or the identifier for the resource. So that's definitely attainable.
With VuFind, what ILSs is it able to layer over at this point? We've got quite a long list. The level of support varies. I mean, obviously the Voyager support is strong because we use Voyager here. We've got a number of Olive libraries. There's a whole spin-off project, I think initiated by Lehigh for Cersei Dynix support.
Evergreen is coming.
Yes, Evergreen is definitely coming. We're also working with a group that started at this year's Code for Lib and that is working around the Extensible Catalog Organization's NSIP toolkit, which is sort of a long-term goal to have an external standalone modular product that abstracts your ILS into an API that can be used with anything. And so VuFind will support that, and I'm hoping that that will take a lot of the ILS driver development burden off of VuFind and put it in a shared place where multiple interested projects can collaborate on that one specific problem. And I think that will open things up further when we reach that goal.
I'm going to say, going back to what I said at the very beginning, the notion of open standards and modular architecture enables you to take things like that that are key functions and have a whole community working on that, and then gain the value of that effort in the other projects.
And certainly the prototype of that is the indexing tool that VuFind uses to ingest MARC records. SolarMARC was a joint project between VuFind and then the Blacklight, which is another open source discovery tool. And so both of the communities came together, built something, and now we both rely on it heavily. And I think it's a better tool than either community could have built on its own.
What about innovative?
Yes, there is innovative support. It relies largely on screen scraping, but it works.
In fact, I think the Tricolorist folks were the original ones who built that, right?
Oh, okay.
Although they never brought it up.
Could you go into a little more detail about how you see the EAD fitting into VuFind? You said some folks are working on that now. Would
Right.
that just be another facet, or would it be more complex than that?
Well, as Dave mentioned, right now there's not native support for hierarchical documents, so that poses a particular challenge since you're basically giving a flat results list based on a very complex tiered document. But Eric Lees Morgan at Notre Dame is working on this, the EAD integration. I saw a demo of his work in progress yesterday. And so right now the way he's dealing with it is he's traversing through the EAD and sort of creating a multi-tiered title from all of the levels of the document so that when you search, you see the context in which you're searching. And we had talked about making some refinements to that so that the level of the document being indexed is the primary title. The hierarchy leading up to it is sort of a subtitle so that you can search for the level that you want and hopefully have that become more relevant in your rankings, but also be able to do broad searches that bring in all the different pieces. And also his approach relies on having the full EAD record rendered as HTML so that from your viewfind results you can actually link directly to an anchor point in the EAD and see how your search result fits into that document in context.
So transform into HTML on the fly, or you'd have like HTML documents in the repository?
I believe the way he's doing it is he's harvesting the EAD and pre-processing them and then indexing them into viewfind. So he has a repository of HTML derived from EAD. And as I say, that's all work in development, but I think it will become part of the core viewfind distribution as soon as it's mature enough to be cleanly shareable.
It's high on our hit list from the summit of new features.
I know people are trying to use KD in a number of different ways. I'm curious about usability in general and how you're getting feedback, either through other institutions who are using your products or that you're testing directly, for any of the pieces.
Well, for the digital library portion of the piece, all of the user testing has been in-house, and only members of the digital library team, really, based on feedback.
VuFind has had some usability testing in external environments independent of our project. The folks at Yale did some work, right, and published some information. There's been usability studies in the community and in the individual institutions, both here in North America and in the UK. Right? What's that project that Owen was telling us about? Sidal over in was it in Wales?
Schwepp, I think.
No. Well, there are people who have done extensive usability testing, specifically at VuFind in their local communities. And unfortunately, one of the things people have found is that a lot of users don't use faceted browsing or didn't in the early stages. And one of the interesting questions is how that might change over time as these environments become more and more common.
You said that you're working out the audio and video portion of the how do you perceive those files to be uploaded? In what format? Will they be, any format will be ingestible with your system? And then how do you service the user? In what format is it presented?
That was a topic of discussion about 2 weeks ago, and we don't know. We would probably take without going into too much detail, but we would probably take the highest quality format possible to serve as an original, and then whatever we service from that is completely up in the air right now.
You're not sold on any particular interface?
No.
I think in the interest of the sort of modular, pluggable architecture that we're talking about, the ideal approach would be you can write code for any format, and we provide as much as we can, and other people can contribute so that it can support whatever you can throw at it. Do I say that without myself intimately knowing the architecture of the digital library?
No, I mean, assuming you have unlimited storage, you can put, as many copies of the same video online as you would.
Yeah, I mean, video raises a whole other spectrum storage is kind of a non-issue for us because we've been granted a license to use more or less what we need on the SAN the university supports. But, you know, I think there might be limits to growth, and I think one of the really big questions long term, and I didn't get into this morning, but is, you know, what's local and what's in the cloud, and what does our long-term storage strategy look like? And there's two faces to that. One is what's reasonable and affordable, and the other is what are our preservation obligations and where do those take place? And you know, so in some ways, what we've done is deferred the long-term answer to that question, but we know it's out there. And how much local storage, if we really started doing video, because you know that's really an order of magnitude or more greater per item of storage requirements. So you know, I guess it depends on the compression and format.
Right.
Really, it does. But
and the length, if you're going to compare it to one of our other items, a 500-page book of TIFFs is going to be significantly larger than
that's true
one
because
video.
of the preservation format.
Well, I think video also brings up a whole new set of challenges as far as the ever-changing technologies that are involved and the patents that are linked to those technologies.
Exactly.
Well, preservation brings up a question I have. You know, besides descriptive metadata, what kind of other metadata are you gathering for preservation of the digital objects or the? I mean, like for example, the Quality LA project that I'm involved in, we're looking pretty detailed at the premise model of you know, digital preservation and how that interfaces between even repositories. So even if you weren't going to stick with one repository, you have collections of multiple repositories, how you can preserve.
We're actually not using premise right now, but I've been reading about it over the summer, and it's definitely a good model for tracking, I guess, manipulations. Right now, we're recording the quality that we scanned it, by whom, when, and if any manipulation had occurred to the original, what we're calling the original, which would just be, you know, cropping it, essentially. But it's the software is set up in a way to add as much or as little as you want. It all boils down to the cataloger and how motivated they are.
And what your institutional policy is.
Right.
Or what the standards are, yeah, what the policy
Yeah. And one other thing on video storage, you know, since the inception of the digital library, storage costs have dropped and will continue to drop. You know, just for example, as a portable hard drive where we store temporary files, we could not get larger than a half a tetrabyte, and now you know you can buy a tetrabyte for $100. So the cost of mass storage is dropping and will continue to drop over time. 5 years from now, I don't think storage will be an issue in any format, size-wise, which is another call for digitizing at a really high resolution and making rich data available, because the storage will come at a really incredibly reduced rate in the future.
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely agree with that. So for video and audio preservation or even display, storage is only half the problem. Displaying it and having an interface that's usable is the other you know, battle. Streaming it in a way that allows for access to it's not dependent on your bandwidth, your own bandwidth. Mobile viewing, obviously Flash, you know, cuts that you know, into that pretty hard. We were trying to do Flash, trying to be cross-browser and cross-platform independent.
That's arguably the standard right now for serviceable videos, FLV, YouTube-esque quality.
For access.
Pardon?
For access.
For access, yes.
Except on iPads.
Except on iPads.
So that really, it's growing. You know, Apple devices are growing, especially academics. So it's not really an option then for a good, you know, a viable presentation.
True. But we could provide multiple access. You know, if you want to download, you know, a 500 megabyte AVI and that's all your iPad can handle, then you know that's an option.
And certainly this comes into the area of of scope, and since we're building on an open platform and using open source tools, I suspect that there are open source communities interested in solving this problem, and I think this would be an area where we want to find the right people to collaborate with rather than trying to tackle this in our digital library package. But again, by making it pluggable and so forth, hopefully we can support whatever comes down the pike.
And as far as the digital library software is concerned, we can support any file format and any serviceability. It's just what is the standard that we should follow is a question.
I mean, one of the really interesting things to note is that even, if you look at VuFind, there's core components of VuFind that originate well outside the library community and that are supported by a whole community of developers that have very little to do with what we're interested in, both the Lucene and the Solar platforms. So that's kind of the funny thing about open source is that there's this ability to put things together and you can solve problems that are domain specific. But you don't have to write the tools to solve those problems because they've been developed in other domains. It's a really interesting approach to make the developing functions and features.
And certainly that there's sort of a mirror image to that by putting developers into libraries and having them contributing back to these projects, then the library is contributing to the greater good beyond the library itself. And it helps validate the library's existence.
Okay, well, thank you very much.